Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Thanks for joining us today. Today we will be talking about conflict in Central Asia or the Caucasus region. We'll be looking at the Armenian-Azerbaijani conflict and an outlook. We'll be looking at an overview of it and how the outlook looks given the recent tensions. Joining us today is our manager Satati and our senior analyst Dr. Ramu. So to start off with, Dr. Ramu, can you give us a bit of an introduction on the conflict and some background for listeners who may not be well versed in the region?
All right. Thanks a lot, Uday. So, when you talk about the South Caucasus region, Armenia and Azerbaijan are indispensable players. And this is mostly because of the Soviet legacy and the creation of power vacuums or security vacuums following the dissolution of the Soviet Union in 1991. And the Nagorno-Karabakh conflict it's deeply entrenched with disputes intensifying, between Armenia and Azerbaijan after the collapse of the USSR. So this region it became a breakaway, like a breakaway exclave, and it declared independence immediately after 91, resulting in its subsequent occupation by the Armenian forces in the same year. So that actually like triggered the first Nagorno-Karabakh war. By 1993, the Armenian forces had gained control over the entire exclave and also occupied like almost 20% of the territory that was hitherto claimed by Azerbaijan. Eventually, the conflict ended in a ceasefire that was mediated by Russia in Kyrgyzstan. Um, so ever since the first Nagorno-Karabakh, the conflict has always been simmering. I mean, it has intermittent flare-ups, but mostly it's been like kind of a region of high tensions. I mean, with tensions boiling on both sides. I mean, be it
Right.
socio-ethnic or be it even in terms of economic projects that are coming, in the vicinity.
Yeah.
Yeah. And let's move on to the second Nagorno-Karabakh. So the main flare-up after 1991 to 1994, it happened in 2020, quite recently, and it also lasted until the Russia brokered ceasefire. After 44 days of fighting. And Azerbaijan made substantial territorial gains, reclaiming large parts of the Nagorno-Karabakh region and surrounding districts that had been controlled by ethnic Armenian forces. These were these like ethnic Armenians were branded as renegades, by the Azerbaijanis, and and they were positioned or stationed in the Nagorno-Karabakh since 1994. So the ceasefire agreement also stipulated the deployment of Russian peacekeeping forces to the region to oversee the truce, and this highlighted the shifting geopolitical dynamics in the region. The war has had profound humanitarian impacts. I mean, like displacing and like create resulting in a huge death toll and even displacing thousands of people. Uh, Jumping on
Right.
to the last year, like the most recent skirmish happened in not skirmish, I mean more a kind of a confrontation happened in September of last year when Azerbaijan launched a swift military offensive against Nagorno-Karabakh authorities. And the Azeri side framed it as quote unquote an anti-terrorist operation with the goal of disarming and demanding the unconditional surrender of the Nagorno-Karabakh authorities, which were ruled by mostly ethnic Armenians. And amidst a blockade causing severe shortages in the region, the Nagorno Karabakh, which hitherto from henceon I'll be like calling it NK. So NK authorities accused Azerbaijan of violating an agreed ceasefire with a drone strike that killed two pro-Armenian separatists and injured 14 others. So as usual, Russia being the main like mediator over there, mediated a truce and a ceasefire, which led to the disarmament of the NK forces and the announced dissolution of its government. So ever since the September episode, Azerbaijan claims that now it has full control over the Nagorno-Karabakh region. And this was
Right.
immediately followed by European Union brokered peace negotiations in December last year between Azerbaijan and Armenia. The two nations agreed to exchange prisoners of war, work towards drafting a peace agreement with the hope of finalizing it in the next upcoming months. The joint statement issued by both countries also reiterated their intention to normalize relations based on mutual, respect for sovereignty, territorial integrity, and whatnot. And also, it was a move towards peace, after the mass exodus of Karabakhi Armenians, like almost 120,000 ethnic Armenians actually left Armenia, NK, following Azerbaijan's offensive. But however, these peace talks have been treading on a rocky path. So maybe of what has happened in the last 2 months, maybe Sitati, you can actually give us an overview about like the recent security incidents that have kind of is threatening to derail the ongoing peace negotiations. So over to you, Sitati.
Yes, thank you very much, Dr. Ramu. I think it's important that we go over these recent developments just to shed light on the cause of the conflict beyond the usual Nagorno-Karabakh region. To start off, on the 31st of last month, that is January, the Armenian Prime Minister Nikol Pashinyan proposed a mutual arms control mechanism and a non-aggression agreement with Azerbaijan. And it's critical to take into account that this proposal seeks to enhance, peace, given the fact that negotiations, which started off in December last year, have stalled. But it's also critical to note that this proposal which seeks to enhance peace between Azerbaijan and Armenia is unlikely to be ratified at this point based on the ongoing disputes between the two countries. Later on the 1st of February, Armenia's Prime Minister Nikol Pashinyan criticized Russia's reliability as a military and defense partner. And to cap it all on this, Pashinyan insisted that Armenia has to look beyond Russia and try to enhance relations with France and the United States. And just to give further insights on this, is that this particular development signified a rift between, Yerevan, that is Armenia, and Moscow, with Armenia seeking new allies. This move definitely, that is the CSTO, and Armenia's traditional strategy of relying on Russia for its defense requirements. Fast forward to the 12th and 13th of February. On the 13th of February, the Azerbaijani forces attacked Armenian forces in the Nakinhand area in Armenia's Syunik province. 4 Armenian soldiers died due to the attacks. Further to this particular attack, Armenia also claimed that, Azerbaijan, held Azerbaijan responsible for the attacks and called it as a provocation which could destabilize, the situation over the region, or in the region, rather. And then on the 15th of February, Prime Minister Nikol Pashinyan of Armenia claimed that Azerbaijan intends to instigate a full-scale war against Armenia. And of course, this demonstrates the rising tensions between the two countries. Later on the 20th of February, rallies were held in Armenia's capital, Yerevan, to commemorate the independence of the Nagorno-Karabakh region, as well as to protest against the government's inability, to effectively handle the conflict with Azerbaijan. And it's critical to note that this indicates growing public pressure against Prime Minister Pashinyan's administration over time, also drawing on the fact that Azerbaijan also took control of the Nagorno-Karabakh region in September last year. And on the 24th of February, Azerbaijan's defense ministry reported that Armenian forces had fired at its military positions in the autonomous Nakhchivan region. And based on this incident in the autonomous Nakhchivan region and the other one in the Nakhin area in Syunik province in Armenia, then definitely this demonstrates that the conflict has the potential to expand beyond the usual Nagorno-Karabakh region into other territories. And then on the 26th of February, Azerbaijan's President Ilham Aliyev inaugurated the Khojaly Genocide Memorial, which commemorated the mass killing of Azerbaijani people by Armenian forces in 1992.
Yes.
Lastly, today, which is the 29th of February, opposition activists from the Miasin political movement in Armenia will be protesting at the Freedom Square from around 5 p.m. local time. And they aim to, demand the resignation of Prime Minister Nikol Pashinyan. I've just mentioned that the Armenian public is, not really impressed with the way Pashinyan's administration has handled, the conflict with Azerbaijan. So more interesting stuff to follow, subject to multiple developments.
Well, so thanks for the summary, Sitati and Dr. Ramu. So it seems that, we're on the precipice of further conflict at the moment in this region. Before we talk about the impacts, on energy infrastructure in the region, as this area has become a major exporter and transit point for energy, maybe Sitati, could you just comment briefly on the military strength of Armenia versus Azerbaijan? You mentioned that, Russia has not been defending Armenia as Armenia wants. Whereas Azerbaijan, as we saw in last year's escalation, they pretty much went unopposed across this vast region of territory. So could you just comment on that? And then maybe you and Dr. Ramu can also talk about the impacts of this conflict on energy infrastructure in the region.
Yeah, I mean, thanks for that. Just a quick overview on to respond to that. I mean, Azerbaijan at this point, has its military strength and capabilities certainly outstrips. Drawing from the point that Azerbaijan has a superior, is superior in terms of. And if Armenians, we could be witnessing more extended, flare-ups, not just in the Nagorno-Karabakh region, but also in these other regions as well. So, and I think that's what really informs, Armenians or the Pashinyan-led administration, to try and even look for other potential allies in France and the United States to show up its capabilities. And one could cheekily maybe insinuate the fact that that Armenia had with Russia. Probably could also be looked at through the lens that maybe Russia, in one way or another, wouldn't really want to, strengthen Armenia's military or help its military to, improve its capabilities. For one. Also reasons, and closer ties and one can deduce that there could be by Moscow not to enhance Armenia's military capabilities on that front. So that's a critical factor. How I look at it, that even if we have flare-ups in these other controversial zones between the two countries, then still Azerbaijan's military is much more, superior compared to that of Armenia. And unless you have contradictory views to mine, Uday, what would you?
No, I largely
say to
agree. I
that?
think I largely agree. I think Azerbaijan has really leveraged its connection with Turkey and other states to procure weapons and drones and artillery systems, for example, that have really given it an edge over Armenian forces, who, as you mentioned, have been kind of isolated by Russian support. Hence them looking for alternatives. Whether the alternatives will give military support to Armenia right now remains unclear, as that does mean, the West stretching itself out into another conflict. But they always have an appetite for that, so who knows? But let's move on to the impacts on energy infrastructure. Dr. Ramo, if you could kickstart that, what does this conflict mean for energy infrastructure and, the industry?
Yeah, thanks a lot, Uday. Yeah, I mean, thank you, gentlemen, for giving a wider overview about the security dynamics and the security asymmetrics between Azerbaijan and Armenia. So when you're talking about the South Caucasus region involving these two countries, so we need to even go beyond the regional security issue, because these are also intricately linked to the broader energy geopolitics of the region, so affecting energy security, market stability, and like regional as well as international relations, not just for the South Caucasus region or the Caspian Central Asia region, but also for like energy markets based all the way in Europe. So the conflict's proximity to critical energy infrastructure, mostly oil and gas pipelines that transport feedstock from the offshore basins in the Caspian region. I mean, of Azerbaijan, the Shah Deniz gas fields, in offshore Baku region to Europe. So and the conflict poses risks of supply disruptions. And additionally, any escalation could deter investment in the region's energy sector, given the potential for damage to infrastructure and the overall instability that it can induce. So yeah, and so again, like when you talk about security asymmetries, you also have to talk about economic asymmetries between Azerbaijan and Armenia. uh, Azerbaijan has so far had a rather business as usual approach to anything which is apart from the Nagorno-Karabakh conflict or the ethnic tensions with Yerevan, because it has always been historically been like like an oil producer and a promising oil exporter, and also right now in terms of the energy source diversification program of the European Union to diversify away from its dependence on Russian gas, which only got accelerated after the Ukrainian conflict. Azerbaijani gas has actually become it has actually it has been trying to fill that vacuum. So it has an important position that way in the global energy market. So the country's pipelines, such as the old Baku Tbilisi Seyhan pipeline. So this pipeline was built back in the days in the mid 90s, and it was built in a way which deliberately bypassed the volatile region, which composes the Nagorno-Karabakh enclave, and which completely bypassed Armenia. It goes all the way bypassing Armenia to Georgia, and then comes directly to Turkey, from where through different feeder pipelines and interconnectors, it's connected to the domestic pipeline network in Turkey, and it goes all the way crossing towards Greece, and then to supply gas to southern Europe. And because of the proximity to these of these pipelines to this conflict prone region, that has actually created sort of a paranoia among investors in terms of how whether or not this might actually conflagrate into a regional war in the near future. Then persistent tensions and the risk of conflict escalation can also deter foreign investment in the regional energy projects. And investors normally seek stable environments for long-term investments, especially in terms of something like a pipeline. This is it is extremely dependent on contracts, and it's extremely dependent on the infrastructure between the producer, the transit provider, as well as the consumer. And increased military activities or potential sabotage acts can deter such or can can disrupt energy shipments, that are taking place in the vicinity. Um, the conflict may even prompt regional countries to seek greater energy independence and diversification. For instance, Armenia, which relies heavily on imported energy, because of the tensions with Azerbaijan, could accelerate efforts to find alternative energy sources or routes, potentially involving Iran or, for that matter, even Georgia as a re-exporter of energy. And re-exporter of energy in the sense that Georgia could re-export the energy it gets from Azerbaijan, because Armenia cannot directly afford to buy it from Azerbaijan. So, and this conflict underscores the importance of securing and diversifying, energy export routes to avoid this over dependence on a single transit corridor. In terms of the shifting regional cooperation and development, so if it escalates, like if there are like long-term unresolved tensions that could hinder broader regional cooperation and development, including joint energy projects that benefit the South Caucasus region as a whole and even beyond. Because it's like a major transit geography, as I had mentioned before. Conversely, a resolution to the conflict could pave the way for increased regional collaboration, opening up new opportunities for energy exploration, production, and even transmission projects that leverage the region's strategic location as well as its resources. So yeah, I mean, that is like an overview of the major impacts on the energy infrastructure in the region. So I think maybe it's prudent to move on to how investors or potential or existing businesses, having direct or indirect operations in this region can navigate through these risks. So probably I'll open the floor to either of you, like Uday or Sitati. You can take over. You can give a sort of an advice to potential businesses with operations in the region.
Yes, I think I'll go first, Dr. Ramu, and many thanks for giving us an elaborate, possible impact as far as for businesses as far as the conflict is concerned. And it's critical, at this juncture for businesses to remain vigilant and, of course, regularly update their situational awareness and adapt the operational and security strategies to the evolving situation. And most importantly, they need to monitor the political developments in Azerbaijan and Armenia. And this means that businesses with operational exposure in the region need to stay informed on the diplomatic efforts, especially the peace talks between the two countries, and also Armenia's proposal for mutual arms control and non-aggression agreements. In addition to that, businesses also need to prepare for escalation. They need to be aware that the flare-ups, especially on the border areas, are likely to, additional flare-ups, for that matter, possible. Or are likely. And further, with regard to the conflict, and just to build a broader context on this, is that the commemoration rallies and opposition protests in Armenia definitely reflect a complex socio-political landscape for businesses to be sensitive to the local sentiments and also understand the potential for civil unrest, which could disrupt operations. Another critical advice for businesses to consider is to review the operations in border areas in light of the reported military engagement in the autonomous Nakhchivan region, which underscores the risk of conflict expansion. And businesses operating or transiting near the border areas should undertake thorough risk assessments and consider maybe relocating assets or personnel if the flare-ups persist. And also important is the fact that businesses need to engage in diplomatic monitoring by keeping a close watch on the global diplomatic efforts to resolve the conflict. In addition to businesses also planning for potential disruptions to, transport and other local services, especially in near the border areas. And finally, businesses also need to liaise with local authorities and international bodies in the operational areas and in enabling them to, to emergency assistance during periods of heightened tensions. So at this point, I mean, before I bring in Uday, maybe for his final thoughts, I think it's critical that for businesses with operational exposure in the region, considering, I mean, reaching out to epic assistance for, bespoke risk assessments for the operations or travel-related, activities as well in the region. So they should feel free to reach out to epic assistance for such, assessments. Otherwise, at this point, I would want to bring in Uday maybe for his closing thoughts on this discussion.
Yeah, so thanks a lot, Dr. Ramu and Satati. I think you've covered everything really well. All I would add is for businesses operating in the region or who are dependent on supply chains through the region and or they have operations there, etc. The most important thing is to have a flexible kind of approach to the situation. Know where flare-ups can occur, where they can affect your operations or travel. And know that escalations can come very suddenly, as we saw last year. So flare-ups can happen like that. So maintaining a flexible posture is quite important in this situation. Anyway, I think this was a really interesting discussion, guys. Thanks a lot, Dr. Ramo and Satati, for joining us. And thank you for the listeners listening in. Feel free to reach out to APAC Assistance. We've done multiple reports on this subject and have operationally helped clients in the region. Thank you for your time and have a good
You too, Uday. Thank you. Thanks, Satati. Bye-bye.